Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Louise Misztal. I'm the Executive Director at Sky Island Alliance. Thank you all for joining us this morning about a topic that's actually near and dear to our hearts at Sky Island Alliance in terms of helping people understand that nature really underpins so much of our health and wellness and our economy. So I'm really glad to be hosting this today. I know this webinar was shared through some different venues. So if you're not familiar with Sky Island Alliance or you're not already in the Alliance, we work to protect and restore the diversity of life and lands in what's known as the Sky Island region of southeastern Arizona and northern Mexico. And we're going to talk a little bit about this today, but it's a pretty special place in the world with a lot of biodiversity, beautiful nature that people come from around the world to see, which is pretty amazing. And Santa Cruz County, which we're going to be talking about, is at the heart of the region. So again, southeastern Arizona and northern Sonora. And Sky Island Alliance has invested a lot of work with volunteers in Santa Cruz County, working to survey and save and restore springs, working to keep wildlife connected and thriving with our border wildlife study, and road closures in the area on Forest Service lands to restore habitat. So all kinds of things that help support nature and people enjoying and thriving with nature. So we're really glad to be hosting this today. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that the Sky Island office in Tucson is on the land of Tohono O'odham, Pasquayaqui, and other indigenous peoples. And our work throughout the Sky Island region, including in Santa Cruz County and on both sides of the US-Mexico border, does take place on indigenous lands. A couple of housekeeping things. So there will be a recording. We're recording this and we'll follow up with an email. Please share this widely if you have folks that you think would be interested. We want to share this topic around. And then there's in the chat box, feel free to place questions. We're going to let Chuck talk through the presentation and then we'll save some spaciousness at the end for Q&A. What else? Yeah, so go ahead and put your questions in the chat as we go along and I'll help facilitate passing those to Chuck. And then just a couple context points. So we wanted to host this topic in particular right now because, as I imagine all of you with us know, there is a large mine project and a proposal to expand that in the Patagonia Mountains, the South 32 Hermosa mine. And we are currently in a public comment period on the draft environmental impact statement that was put out by the Forest Service. There will be comments due on that on June 20th, and we're going to have some resources for you to engage in that. So Sky Island Alliance, if you are not yet on our email list, if you came to this webinar through a different avenue, please do sign up. We will be sending out the recording, but we'll also be sending an action alert next week with some support for you to make personal comments yourself. We are doing organizational comments with a large group of partners, including Patagonia Area Resource Alliance, the Borderlands Restoration Network, who Chuck is affiliated with, Earthworks, and Patagonia Area Resource Alliance and Earthworks are hosting a webinar next week that will walk you through how to comment as a member of the public. So we should be sharing, we're sharing these links in the chat. So if you're interested in joining that, we'll also share it out with the recording. I think the last thing I wanted to, the webinar is Tuesday, June 17th at 5 p.m. I didn't actually say that yet. And they will get you oriented to what a draft environmental impact statement is and how you can speak up for this unique biodiverse ecosystem. The last thing is I just want to share some good news. Patagonia Area Resource Alliance and other partners recently, I don't know how recently, but in the scheme of this mine, appealed to the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality for the air permit for the mine, and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has responded by rejecting the air permit on the grounds it didn't meet Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act standards, which is good news. Mines need a lot of permits to move forward, and this is one step in the direction of holding the mine accountable to our standards of clean air and clean water. All right, that's a lot of sort of housekeeping and introduction. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Chuck Klingenstein, who is a board member with Borderlands Restoration Network. He's an active member of the coalition of residents, experts, and organizations working to protect the Patagonia Mountains from mining. His expertise includes environmental planning, permitting associated with federal, state, and local agencies, transportation and land development projects. He has served as the founding president of the first land trust in Utah, now known as the Utah Open Lands. And as an adjunct professor at the University of Utah, Chuck taught courses in land use planning, environmental planning, growth management, and land use law. He's also served as an elected official and a planning commissioner for both a city and a county, and is in love with the desert. He fell in love with the desert 40 years ago, like many of us, and hasn't gotten over it. And so we're glad to have him here with us. He's got a wide breadth of expertise, and he's going to talk to us about the nature-based economy in Santa Cruz County. I will turn it over to you, Chuck.
So, Louise, you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear
Good.
you.
That's our sound check. And as Louise mentioned, we've got hopefully a very interesting topic about how nature supports, I might say, Southeast Arizona, but the lessons learned in this study, and one of the goals of the study is to make sure we could replicate it in any county in the US. So there are over 3,000 counties in the United States. And I don't know where all the audience is today, but I happen to be in Montana right now. And you can replicate sort of the methodology, do this study elsewhere. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about what we shorthandedly call the NBRE, or the Nature-Based Restorative Economy. And also some future study areas may include a phase 2 update now that we have more new data since the completion of the original study. Something I never fully understood and just starting to get a better handle on: natural capital and ecosystem service analysis. Very interesting topic to me. Next slide, please. I've got about 35 minutes roughly here, and we'll hopefully have a good amount of time for questions and maybe answers. But the whole idea here is not to get into the weeds of the study itself. Louise and her staff will somehow post a link to the actual study, and there's a couple of executive summaries, and hopefully they'll be available for you after this talk today. I'm going to talk about why and how we got to this study, some of the interesting points we learned, the successes of the 2021 study, future areas of interest. And I really come at this, as Louise mentioned, not only my professional career, academic, but I was an elected and appointed official for over 22 years. And I've learned in the process that if you want to get your decision makers' attention, you got to do it on more than emotion. And sometimes the facts get you there too. But for public officials, it's often about return on investment, I'm sorry to say. So if we don't have good measurable economic analysis to back up what we're trying to say and do, it's hard to get their attention. And I want to make sure I acknowledge at this point that the University of Arizona did a superb job on this. I've been involved with a lot of work of this nature. We did a national search through a network that I've developed over my career. We had an excellent response of consulting teams from both academia, private sector, combinations of those two. But we ended up choosing the University of Arizona because we wanted to make sure, that it was seen as a study done by some in-house folks, in-state folks, I should say, but also they really got what we're trying to get to. That was very clear in their response for our request for proposals. And they did a superb job, and I just can't thank them enough. I think they got some recognitions for the work they did, in fact. Next slide, please. So the question is, how did we get to this study? Why did we do it? Well, around the time my wife and I bought a place in Patagonia for retirement, and it was around 2018, right around that time, the study came out from Arizona State University, and it was done by Arizona Minerals. That was the precursor. Well, it wasn't a precursor. South 32 ended up buying the mine, the entitled mine, if you will, because they had proven up that it had great reserves of manganese, zinc, lead. I think there's probably another material or two. And South 32 put down $1.2 billion to buy out AMI. But this study was, quite frankly, really bad. And I began my own personal critique of it because I have a tendency to get involved in things. It's an intellectual curiosity, I guess. I wrote this critique of it. A few people saw it and they said, wow, we didn't get it. And I saw pretty quickly it was really a bad fiscal impact study. It only looked at one side of the equation, revenues for the county, revenues for the state. It didn't look at the costs. Who is going to take care of the road infrastructure, hospital and medical care? How about school districts, emergency services, and police, fire, all the things that make a county tick. And they had no idea about the costs of those impacts. Right about the time all this information came to fruition, a consortium of us came together, including Sky Islands Alliance, Borderlands Restoration, the former Tucson Audubon, now known as the Tucson Bird Alliance, Nature Conservancy, Sky Islands Tourism Association, and others. And we pulled together $50,000, figuring that might get us a pretty good study. And we got administrative support from the town of Patagonia. PARA was an active part of it. And we made sure that the study was going to be balanced, objective. It could go through a peer review process. And that led to the study that you see on this list that came out in 2021. Now, since the MBRE, the Ernst & Young Corporation developed a new report for South 32. It's a heck of a lot better. It's something I could say is, much more balanced in its approach. It could be picked apart, but I haven't taken the time to do it. Next slide, please. The first step we had to do is define what the nature-based restorative economy is. And the coordinating group made up of many of the organizations I just mentioned, we wrestled with it, debated it. And what you see here is the guiding working definition that we worked with throughout the remainder of this study. Next slide, please. So the biggest challenge of all is the MBRE cuts across different industries and is not accounted for in traditional government statistics. Any of you who have done economic analysis of this sort have probably dealt with the Bureau of Economic Analysis, a federal agency, and they have typically about a 20 to 22 category segmentation of the entire US economy, whether it's government, whether it's mining, manufacturing, education, local government. There are all these different sectors. And buried within many of these sectors are elements of a nature-based economy. We don't have a category that says environmental or nature-based economics. There was a brief attempt during the Obama administration to start this database. Unfortunately, sequestration killed it off. So we had to figure out a way to extract information from these very complex data sets and to be able to define the total economic contribution of the nature-based economy. And one of the things I wrote into the RFP is I want to make sure we understood the total economic contribution built upon all the multipliers, whether they were direct, indirect, or induced multipliers that built up the entire economy of Santa Cruz County. And we wanted to make sure we understood the value added of it in terms of gross domestic product of the county. And then there was a host of other analysis, socioeconomic and a natural resource profile. We did a SWOT analysis because we wanted to understand our strengths, our weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. I think the threat one you can figure out pretty quickly. But the whole goal here was to make sure that our elected officials for Santa Cruz County realized there was something more than mining. They were so focused on it because the county is highly reliant on the vegetable and fruit industry, the import, warehousing, distribution, trucking component of getting the fruit and vegetables moved all over the nation. And there was a slowdown because this study was done to take a look at things in 2019. We started the study during COVID, and we want to get a snapshot of the county in 2019 before the effects of COVID had hit, which obviously was a negative factor when they closed down the border. Fruit and vegetables weren't coming in. The county's freaking out. What are they relying on? The building of a border wall was causing economic activity. They had ADOT building the Mariposa interchange, but they knew those were short-term things. So we got the study underway. Next slide, please. And it looks a little crude, this stool, and I can't take credit for it. My sidekick on managing this project was a wonderful person by the name of Linda Shore. And Linda and I, working with the group and consultants, came up with the three components that came up, which were tourism, industries, and the conservation, restoration, preservation sectors, which largely include things like Sky Islands Alliance and Borderlands Restoration. But this three-legged stool concept, when Linda proposed it, the consultants would kind of, scratch their heads, kind of, it really tells the story. And so the three legs support the overall NBRE economy. Next slide, please. Now, the project really was a snowballing effect. We had multiple phases, and the four phases, as you can see, each built upon the previous one, with the end goal of getting to the total economic contribution of the NBRE, along with its multiplier effects. And before I forget it, another important component of this study was to make sure that the county understood that the west side of the county and the east side of the county, they're kind of different animals. Some of this nature-based economy transcends both sides. But by and large, the biggest revenue generators for the county are on the west side, whereas the largest number of nature-based industries are on the east side. The east side has always thought it's gotten little to no attention from the county. And this was to help the county understand, while it's a big economy that covers the entire county, the east side does pull its weight in terms of revenues to the county. Next slide, please. Okay, so the approach. We used a qualitative and a quantitative approach, and good studies use a lot of qualitative data, but that proved to be incredibly important to extract the data out of the typical Bureau of Economic Analysis data sets. There was your classic literature review to see if anybody's ever really done this kind of work, and the consultants found, there's bits and pieces, but nobody had ever really comprehensively tackled this type of study. There was the data collection, again, from the typical data sets, using the model of preferred choice of in-plan, modeling all these economic contributions. The biggest positive we had was the stakeholder and expert interviews. They used what they call a snowballing technique. And they would, we members of the coordinating committee gave them a group of names. I don't remember how many it was. And they tried to build off of that network through a networking approach to develop more and more people. Now, they could have used more time for this to build up the data sets or the way to extract it. But they got 40 plus and they said, we think we're pretty good. And if we're going to stay on schedule, we think we're ready to go. And off they went. Next slide, please, Louise. So the first leg of the stool, you'll remember we spoke about nature-based tourism. And nature-based tourism has, Santa Cruz County is blessed with, a national historic park. We have incredible state parks. We have the Forest Service, which constitutes, I think it's well over 50%, if not close to 55% of the county. The state lands of Arizona, I think it's about 8% of the county. We have the lands associated with our two river corridors that intermittently flow. We have an incredible agritourism industry that continues to grow every year. And wine tourism and day visitors. Gosh, we have vans and buses coming down from Tucson all the time. And the hunting sector, and I'm going to add fishing because a lot of people come down to fish Lake Patagonia, but hunting and fishing is a big deal, especially for a lot of the snowbirds. Next slide, please. Something I'll mention before I go much further on this topic of money. We never thought we would go head to head with the fruit and vegetable industry. It's just a huge industry on the west side of the county. Again, we were trying to tell our story, those of us in the nature-based restorative economy. But, I think the idea was let's get on the radar screen of the county so they know, don't ignore it. It's another way to make sure your economy is diversified. And we found there were, direct sales, jobs, income, and contributions to the county's gross domestic product. Next slide, please. And all of this is in the study. That's why I'm not spending a lot of time on numbers. Plus, it gets boring to listen to somebody regurgitating numbers. The next leg of the stool was nature-based industries, actually producing products. And those renewable products were things like ag, wineries, food and wood. The one that really surprised us was renewable energy. We did not know we had a solar farm in Santa Cruz County. And that was one of the fun things that having consultants dig into your backyard is all of a sudden you learn things you never knew about. And we learned a lot, but there it was, a solar farm just located north of Nogales, just off the interstate and kind of buried behind some trees. And I mean, it's not a huge one and there's opportunities to grow more solar farms, but that was a nice wake-up call for all of us. Next slide, please. Let's see here. Continuing on. Oh, I saw the question pop up. We're going to get to it. Next slide talks about the sales, jobs, income, and gross domestic product contributions of nature-based industries. And again, I'm not going to regurgitate numbers. Next slide, please. Now, I think this will address that last question that popped up. So the final leg was the whole restoration economy landscape, whether you're in preservation, conservation, or restoration. And as you can see in the graphic, Santa Cruz County's got all sorts of wonderful components, whether you take a look at the state park That's down in the San Rafael Valley that most people don't even know about, sadly. But the Nature Conservancy years ago bought a ranch before it got developed or split up. And there's a state park right down there next to the border. And if you've never been out in the San Rafael grasslands, absolutely stunningly beautiful and well worth a visit. We go out there and watch the moon sets and the moon rises and all that sort of stuff, but it's beautiful. This graphic, continuing on, Coronado National Forest shows up pretty prominently, the Santa Cruz River, the Santa Cruz Valley National Recreation Area, and let's see here. And I think the rest of it speaks pretty well for itself, and it was in this study. Next slide, please. The actors involved in preservation and conservation are quite numerous. And whether it's at the federal level, we have 3 agencies. They used to be very active. I say used to because we don't have the foggiest notion what the new funding cuts mean for that. But nonetheless, they're there. Our state and local governments, the state is phenomenally active in the region and the county. Unfortunately, again, they're going to be affected by federal cutbacks because a lot of the funding are flow throughs from the feds through the state to a lot of us nonprofits. Then the nonprofit sector, including those of us, and whether it's the organizations of Borderlands, Sky Alliance, Tucson Audubon, Tucson Bird Alliance, and then there are all the others, whether it's like there's a LLC by the name of Wildlife Corridors. It's a private group, very close to Borderlands Restoration. They've been buying up failed subdivisions. They've been getting forest legacy grants to preserve and try to recreate the linkages between the Santa Rita Mountains and the Patagonia Mountains. Private landowners, so a lot of them are actively working on preserving their lands and restoring them and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So the final leg of the stool, it too produced and contributed in terms of sales, jobs, income, and gross domestic product to the county. And again, we have a set of numbers. And remember, these are just directly supporting the county. We're not even talking about the multiplier effects of induced and indirect increases in revenues to the county. Next slide, please. Now we're getting to the numbers. And I caution you again, we're not trying to go head to head with the big industries. In fact, I don't even think we can directly go head to head with the future mining company in terms of their, jobs and pay scales. Again, we are just trying to educate the county. There are other opportunities in terms of revenues for not only the county, but for its citizenry. And as you'll see in a subsequent slide, it has had phenomenal growth over the past 10 years. But these are the direct support of the local economy, whether it's the 780 jobs, the $31 million in value added, and the $76 million in sales. This is a direct contribution to the county. In terms of sales, of course, we get into sales tax revenues, and a lot of our cities in the state, cities, towns are highly dependent on sales tax revenues. Next slide, please. Now, this is where we add it all up, whether it's direct, indirect, or induced effect, or what we call multipliers. And as you can see, the numbers are pretty substantial when you add it all up in terms of all the different sectors of the 3 legs of the stool. But it really adds up it was a very nice picture that we were able to put into this report and share with the county leadership at the time. And I think they were surprised. In fact, I know they were surprised. They said it privately to me, and this type of work had never been done in Santa Cruz County. When we were going through this process, I was talking to the supervisors and some of the other economic folks in the county. They're all were going, well, have you looked at this study? Have you looked at that study? I said, yeah, we've looked at the fruit and vegetable industry economic analysis. We have looked at the Port of Nogales' studies, but nobody's ever taken a look holistically at what it means for the entire county. And what does it mean when you extract out just this sector of the economy? And the fact that a lot of it occurs on the east side, which often, is the one with roads falling apart and not necessarily the best police services and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned earlier, we did a SWOT analysis to try to take a look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what came out of this study were a lot of, it was just fruitful in terms of all the information that we got out of it. We know about the birding and wildlife viewing. We are this incredible crossroads of a biologically rich area. As Carolyn Schaefer would say, and often says, we are a biological hotspot. And I think Louise has said it. It's just a known fact. We have this incredible overlapping area of ecosystems, and it's just incredible. Something that was identified, and we knew about it, but we have watched it just explode, is cycling. We now have an incredibly nationally known, if not becoming internationally known, gravel biking business. A young couple discovered Patagonia, I don't know, 5, 7 years ago. They dug their heels in, they started up several local businesses, but their big thing is gravel biking. Take a look on the website for, I think it's called the Spirit World 100. It's a bike race, and they have a few others, but they now, and it had to be capped. I can't remember the numbers because it got too big, but they go out there and they cycle 100 miles, 80 miles, 60 miles, and people are down every weekend. You go downtown Patagonia on a Saturday morning, and people are grabbing their coffees. We have latte shops and all the stuff that goes with morning stuff, getting ready for their bike rides. They're all gearing up and they're all heading out on Harshaw Road or Harshaw Creek Road out in the San Rafael Valley and all the mining roads. It's blown my mind away how fast that's grown. We have the Anza Trail on the west side. We have the Arizona Trail comes through the area. And then there's just this host of other economic activity. And we have phenomenal history and natural areas. It's just a target-rich environment for tourism. And we have incredible and growing special events and festivals. And the reason, this slide was important is we kept saying to the county, be careful here because we are highly dependent upon nature and our natural attributes around the area. And we don't know how compatible all this is with this mine. And that's why it was important. Louise mentioned this draft environmental impact statement. These are the issues that in theory, they're supposed to analyze and try to minimize, mitigate the impacts of a mine on our economy, because this economy is our lifeblood. Next slide, please. So besides tourism, we have the industries and also the preservation, conservation, and restoration activities. So I've talked about the wine industry. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because I think it speaks for itself. But agritourism is growing. And, I like to bet there's at least 2, maybe 3 new vineyards in the last couple of years. It just keeps happening. Let's see here. Somebody's question just popped up. Oh, there. Leveraging all the leveraging is what it's all about. We're trying to get into more and more of a revenue generating activities and carbon storage. With all the national forests, carbon sequestration is an important attribute of a future. Mitigation banking, for wetlands complexes, of which we surprisingly have. Water markets. I mean, we sit on a lot of water. That's why the mine has to pump. I'm forgetting now, it's some ungodly number of water per day. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands. We're up to 1 million gallons or something like that a day, but huge numbers. We have incredible numbers of volunteers, people that come down from, Tucson. We have college education classes coming into the area to study the local environment. Next slide, please. There's that Santa Cruz Valley National Recreation Area, one of the first, one of 55, I think, recognized nationally now, if not more. And it's a beautiful corridor as you drive down from Tucson to Nogales. It's rich in history in terms of a river corridor. There's a whole traditional life that runs through that whole area. The county actually has stepped up to the plate. Patagonia is now being wired for high-speed internet. I don't think it's up and running yet. And unfortunately, it didn't go outside of the town of Patagonia, but it's happening. It's hopefully a step in the right direction. It was federal funding. Whether it's going to happen again, I don't know. I'm not going to hold my breath. But the county has done some great planning for workforce housing, cuisine tourism. Local businesses have been getting more attention from the county. Now, how far that's going to continue, I don't know with the federal cuts. And quite frankly, Santa Cruz County had a little boo-boo, tune of $32 million of embezzled funds, if you haven't heard. So they're kind of wrestling with that one. And then there's the Sky Islands Restoration Collaborative, which is a coalition of partners and adding to leveraging our local economy. Next slide, please. Takeaways. Tons of takeaways. That's all I can say. But I spoke about the Santa Cruz Valley as one of 55 areas recognized for a distinct landscape and everything that goes with it. The biological regions overlapping here, and we're kind of ground zero for all of this. And I happen to notice our Borderlands Restoration Network executive director's on here, so I'm really singing his praises because I've learned a lot about this from him. I've learned about it from Sky Islands Alliance, and I've really come to appreciate the diversity of all this. And the Sentinel landscape is a part of this area. In fact, I think I touch upon that in a next slide or two, but this map depicts how important this biologically, ecologically rich area is and how we need to keep it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this was the one that the consultants were absolutely blown away by. After extracting these economic data sets for the nature-based economy, responsible for over 30% of the net job gains in Santa Cruz County over the past decade. That was a surprise one for them. The county fathers, if you will, were also very surprised by it. We discussed already all the different components that went into the Santa Cruz County economic base. We've talked about the multipliers. The key here is the 2019 study established a baseline of the traditional economy of the county, but also for the MBRE. We showed very clearly there are great opportunities for growth of this economy if nurtured correctly. And we learned about sectors we didn't know anything about. Next slide, please. Potential future study areas. I mentioned a phase 2 with the new data sets that are now available. Economic values that weren't captured in the study, because I think we learned during the course of it, there's even broader areas of study. For instance, the state of Arizona taxes second homes at a higher rate than a primary residential home, meaning more property tax revenues for the local jurisdiction and for the state. And there are probably others too, and maybe we'll pick those up in the next study. The richness of the biodiversity and natural beauty, which really is added up in the natural capital and ecosystem services study areas. Next slide, please. You know, I hate to use a capitalistic term for, ecosystems, but that we're seeing more and more study of them in that way in terms of capital assets, natural capital. Because if you manage it, protect it, it has a value of its own, contributing to our lives, enriching our lives, making our lives better. And a good example, the gentleman responsible for starting Borderlands Restoration, Ron Pulliam, was kind of flabbergasted when the county started proposing a significant water retention detention system, built along classic lines somewhere around where the Harshaw Creek comes into the area. And, we have great flood potential, and that's one of the worries with the mine pumping water, because it's going down Harshaw Creek, saturating the soils. And will the soils be able to what? Fend off floods, because, you want to slow the water down, spread it out, allow it to absorb into the ground. Will that happen? Not, we don't know. But, he proposed a alternate system using natural systems. Last slide, I believe. So I want to make sure anybody wants technical information. Dari Duval and George Fritzhold were the leads on this study, and they did a phenomenal job. I'm happy to answer general questions. I'm not the technician. I'm not by no means an economist. I'm an in-depth generalist in many ways. And then there is a website here, but I think Louise will have an easier one for you to get the study and its executive summaries. And that should do it, Louise.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to stop sharing, but we can pull this back up if we need to, if we have questions related to slides, just so I can see better. So I saw a couple comments I just want to share out loud that apparently there are now 62 national heritage areas, which I didn't know, but you'll have to update your slide. And you had it right in the slide, but it is the Santa Cruz Valley National Heritage Area rather than recreation area. But yes, thank you.
Fair enough.
Thank you for that comment. And then I saw a question about what about dark skies preservation?
Well, we weren't looking at preservation necessarily because it's hard to measure its economics, but it certainly would be an area to maybe take a shot at in terms of a phase two, because people do come to our area for night sky viewing. And
Yeah.
we should have you in the interviews, whoever asked the question, and that's a very important attribute that actually should be measured. Because let's face it, people come from urban areas and I'll tell you, they get out in the San Rafael Valley for moonrise or something, and it's amazing how many stars there are out there.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful spot. Let's see. There was also one more comment. I'll just share that. There's also recently been an ultra marathon brought to the area. So lots of people enjoying the the outdoors.
Yep, that was not in existence back then, but you're right. I remember it. I do remember it.
Let's see if folks have questions and it's easier to come off mute or raise your hand. Feel free to do that. We can field them that way too, or you can continue to put questions in the chat. I think I got all the ones in the chat box. Oh, one new message. Okay, here we go. Have the current Board of Supervisors seen this study and attended an educational session of some sort?
Well, that's a great question. I shared it with the two new ones. Whether they actually saw it is an interesting question, because having been an elected official, the first year is quite overwhelming. You
Mm,
kind of get flooded. I mean, I had the benefit of being a planning commissioner for 9 years before it became an elected official. So it was an easy transition for me. I still had to come up to speed, but I have a feeling they have not delved into it enough to fully understand it. And it might be worth trying to get a
mm.
session with them. Thank you for that reminder.
And then there was another question. This is Mary Darling. Is there a demographic study that accompanies this study?
Not a hardcore demographic study. The demographics were maybe buried in the study, but wouldn't talk directly to it, depending on what you're trying to find.
Okay. And then we've got a comment about this seems like an excellent way to work around to the same ends as rights of nature, potentially.
Um, Again, if you mess with nature, the end result's not good. Whether you want to, say enriching our lives, but Mother Nature has a way of overwhelming you, and I'm not looking forward to flood when monsoons hit and the Harshaw Creek bed is saturated with the mine's pumped water.
Yeah, it could be really ugly. Um, Anybody else want to raise a hand or come off mute and ask a question? Lots of thank yous.
Water is life,
Indeed.
indeed. Somebody had a crazy idea. Maybe it's not so crazy about all this water they're pumping. They said, why just, send it downstream? Why don't they bottle it? There's an economic, well, at least it's not, just going downstream. And I don't know, it
Right.
sounded kind of crazy, but that's the sort of ideas that fly around out there.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions in the chat? Not seeing any in the chat. Anybody want to talk? You all are all hiding.
Well, that's okay. And, and I think people will find so much more than my short information when they look at the study. It's, again, my compliments to the university. They really did a stellar job. Um, you know, phase 2 will take, here I am making it almost sound like it's a fait accompli. I kind of get excited about it. And then I'm going to be talking to a few folks out there in the coming months about it. But I think it's worthy of taking a look at a phase 2. But I really want to monetize, again, a horrible word, but the natural capital and ecosystem services that available in the county that we are working to preserve and enhance and restore.
Right.
Why do we have to sit there and manufacture things when nature has done a pretty darn good job in the first place?
Yeah. I am curious what kind of timeline, how long did it take to prep and do the study? If we were looking at a phase 2, what kind of runway would we be looking at?
Well, it took me a few months just to start build, get the plane taxiing, so to speak. Uh, Once I got the momentum going and got the affiliate organizations moving, um, obviously you had to raise money. It was $50,000 at that time. This time it's going to cost more. I mean, it's just the nature of things. I can't blame the tariffs for it, but they're definitely, I would guess it's in the range of 75 to 85 this time.
Mhm.
It would take another couple of months to interview, shortlist, come up with the preferred people to do the study, get the contracts under signed and executed, see if I can get the town of Patagonia to be the administrative body again. Ron Robinson was absolutely stellar on this project. And then I think that we used about 9 months, maybe 12, somewhere in that range to complete the study. And, have adequate time to do it right. The beauty of it this time is we have the template. We just,
Right.
for updating the study, creating the methodologies to do the natural capital and ecosystem service analysis. There's actually a fair amount of work out there done on this topic, so you're not reinventing the wheel, but that should be adequate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. You answered this question, how much did the study cost? And then who funded it was another question.
As I mentioned earlier, there was a consortium of us that came together. And then once the consortium agreed to pony up, including Sky Islands Lion, Borderlands, Sky Island Tourism Association, and a few other nonprofit entities, then we went out to the public and we capped the donations at 5,000 because we knew we were going to be asking the mine, South 32, for funding, but we didn't want them to pay for the thing. So we
Mm-hmm.
capped it at 5,000. And as Pat Reisner said, I'm happy to, give you $5,000 of this because we're still trying to understand what the economy, nature-based economy is in Santa Cruz County. We know there are all these bits and pieces. And in fact, the study helped them inform their study that was done after ours. You don't really see it in there, but the data sets were helpful to them.
Okay. Okay, let's see. We've got a few more questions popping up. So Mary Darling's asking, she has a question, but not sure if it's relevant about wildlife corridors, maybe how those fit in or if that's part of the thinking.
Wildlife corridors, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Wildlife Corridors is an LLC, and they have been buying up, God, I think they got 2,000 acres of old failed subdivisions and lots in the corridor that connects the Santa Ritas with the Patagonias and all the way down to the border. And it's a significant important attribute to the natural economy. People, I mean, they got hiking trails in this corridor. It'll be open space forever. There's limited real estate development to help fund the overall project. They hope to do a lot more and take the model and use it elsewhere. So it's a very viable part of the local economy.
Mm-hmm. And certainly connected wildlife corridors on the land provide connected open space for people too.
Yeah, there we are messing with Mother Nature with our land development activities.
A note from Leslie at the Santa Cruz Valley National Heritage Area that if a phase 2 comes to pass, if a phase 2 comes to pass so that our economic impact can be calculated, she's talking about they are on schedule to leverage every federal dollar with the equivalent of 4.22 local dollars. So maybe somebody to follow up with about how the Santa Cruz Valley National Heritage Area is bringing in federal funds and leveraging that for the economy.
Well, Leslie, thanks for being here, and we'll certainly be talking if this ever gets off the ground. I must admit I have to kind of get fired up on this whole topic. I've been talking about it now for a couple of months, but I, I get excited about it. I'm very excited about the work, and quite frankly, it's a good way to prevent any dementia issues. It keeps me on my game.
Keep thinking. Any odds this info can persuade decision makers to reject the mine?
No, I hate to say it. If anybody's familiar with the mining law of 1872, our hands are tied.
It's pretty rough.
And
Yeah.
these, and the really difficult thing about this mine is the claims were patented. I forget the years. So technically they're developing only their private property. And what's really sad is mining law does not address horizontal drilling and mining. So they're not just going down on their 500 acres, they're going lateral, and there's no regulations on that activity. Now, the only good thing in this I mean, it's not a good thing. They are talking about forget the acreage. I think they want 200 or 250 acres for storage of waste materials on public lands. Now, that's going to be an interesting one because the Rosemont mine stumbled on that one when there was a court that said, no, the mining law never expected you to, never allowed you to store waste on public lands.
Right.
That's going to go to the Supreme Court, and I don't particularly want to see that happen.
Yeah. Well, I still think, I mean, part of the work of fighting the mine is helping the public understand what's really at stake. And
Yes.
um, you do this work and you slow things down and make them reanalyze the right way and all these things, and things can change. So we'll just keep doing the work.
Well, we do
Yes,
the
I
work.
agree with you. We don't have the legal hook there, but yeah.
I think the most important thing to realize is, and I know there's a lot of disillusioned people with this whole process. Every bit of firepower we can bring to the table, to the comments, to the input, it isn't wasted. Is it going to stop the mine? I don't think so, but it's going to make it far better. And in my private sector work, I used to compliment my opposition. One of my favorites were the Center for Biological Diversity. They were good. And it's groups like that that help shape a project to be much better than it would have been. And I can tell you right now, because of the work of Para and many of us out there, this mine is a heck of a lot better if there had been no opposition to it.
Mhm.
So don't give up. Take take your best shots at it. I can't tell you how that affects the process in a positive way.
Mhm, mhm. Well, on that note, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. So please, keep your eyes peeled for the forthcoming information on the how you can comment on the draft environmental impact statement regarding the mine. We'll keep our eyes and ears peeled for a potential phase 2 and how we can support that study, which I think is important for all of our work and the health of the economy in the county. Um, Thank you
And
so much.
Louise,
Yeah, go ahead.
before you go, I want to emphasize how important it is to be plugged in. You know,
Mm,
Louise has encouraged you to sign up for her newsletters and email blasts, and I get them all. Patagonia Area Resource Alliance is another entity that can use every bit of support
yes.
you can give it. It's been led by Carolyn Schaefer for a number of years. She's got other very capable people. They do excellent informative email blasts. And all these organizations we're talking about can use your financial donation. So please feel free to be generous in your giving, especially during these very hard times. Thank you very much for your support on all this.
Yes. Thank you all for being here and for caring. Spread the word. Speak up if you can. And thank you, Chuck, for sharing this important study with us. I think
Thank you for the invitation. It was a fun thing to reactivate my brain on.
great. Well, good to have you and have a lovely rest of your week.
All right. Good day, all.